We're going to watch Jonelle Bell. Jonelle Bell. Talk about transit equity and frequent service restoration. Yeah, Jonelle Bell. I wonder about this guy. This is a guy that came right out of, was it Blumenauer's office? I forgot which. This stupid dispatch always in the way. I'm not sure if it was Blumenauer. It might have been, or it might have been. It's one of the politicians' office. He served as an intern, and he went right into the Trimet equity director, $100,000 a year, first job ever. One has to wonder about that and the connections, etc., involved with something like that. Not surprising. We know how Trimet works, and not Trimet only, but Portland. I don't mean to sound trite or demeaning, but Jonelle Bell reminds me of Uncle Tom type character. Uncle Tom's. You understand what that is, of course. That's a black man who sells out to the white man to gain favor with the white man, and that's kind of what he appears to me. Because when you listen to him, when you listen to all of the executives, it's kind of a cult of McFarlane, because they're always talking about the great Neil McFarlane and the wonderful Mr. Wonderful, I call him. And all of the executives are in power strictly to make McFarlane look good and to toe the line that they're supposed to toe. And Jonelle Bell is a token, more or less. I mean, if you look at Trimet's management, it's all white men, white old men, just like the city of Portland, all white old men, just like Multnomah County, white old men, and a few women, basically men though, but it's all lily white. This is a lily white area. It's like Idaho almost in its complete lack of diversity at the top. They have a lot of diversity at the very bottom of their organization, the bus drivers. But they have very little diversity at the management level of the organization. I guess they figure in their minds, well, if we have a lot of diversity at the bottom, nobody will notice that we have no diversity at the top. Well, I notice. Janet Toran, who will be leaving, to her credit and her brain, she always seemed smarter than the rest of them to me. And what was she doing there in the first place? Was kind of a token executive. You see, she hardly ever said anything. She was just like, what's his name, that guy that was a ghost? What's his name? I can't even remember his name. the other council guy that ended up getting a pension of $11,000 a month, who never said anything either. Every now and then something would come out of his mouth. Anyway, let's listen to Jonelle talk some. I'm going to interrupt at several points here because some curious things he says here.
Good morning. Thank you, Eric, and good morning, President Warner and members of the board. I have the pleasure of describing a couple of transit equity elements. As you know, in doing with our transit equity program, we're always trying to find and identify ways of really integrating our transit equity policies and all the decisions that we make here. So real quickly, Eric did a great job describing the benefits of frequent service to our riders and the system as a whole, but one of the things I should note is it's also crucially important to note that the proposal before you today also greatly benefits low-income communities of color and transit-dependent riders. We know that frequent service lines benefit transit-dependent riders by decreasing the amount of time the transit-dependent folks are on our buses. Frankly, these are our riders who are spending the most amount of time, the most amount of their day are utilizing our services. So by investing in those lines, we therefore help to decrease the time they spend. Frequent service lines also proportionally serve more low-income and minority riders when looking at other lines. During our equity assessment of this proposal, we compared frequent service lines to non-frequent service lines through a series of filters, through a series of lenses, if you will. A few of those were minority, low-income, LEP, which, as you know, is limited English proficiency, transportation disadvantage, and honored citizens. We found that in each category, frequent service lines outperform non-frequent service lines. And just to note a few highlights, for instance, 30% of our minority populations are within near distance of a frequent service line versus 27% non-frequent service.
Let's take a look at what he just said here because it's a little confusing. He just said 30% of the disadvantaged riders live on the frequent service line and 27% don't live on the frequent service line. Well, first of all, that's not much of a spread, but if 30% live on the frequent service line and 27% don't live on the frequent service line, well, where the hell are the other 43% living? I mean, isn't there only two places you can live? Either it helps you on the frequent service line or it doesn't help you to increase service on the frequent service line. So where's the other 43%? I don't get that. That's something missing. I mean, it should add to 100%. If 27% are not able to use, 27% are not able to take advantage of more frequent service, and 30% are able to take advantage of more frequent service, that doesn't add up to 100%. So what the fuck?
31% of our low-income population are near frequent service lines versus 25% not. And what we learned from this, from a transit equity perspective, again, is frequent service investments, especially midday, and all.
There it is again. This time he's talking about low income. He's saying 31% live on a frequent service line and 25% don't live on a frequent service line. Well, that adds up to 56%. So where's the other 44%? It's got to add up to 100%, John L. I don't understand. Where are the other 44%? Why aren't you talking about the other 44%? Doesn't add up. Something's wrong.
Midday investments here are good and solid investments in our transit-dependent riders. As mentioned earlier, transit-dependent riders, as illustrated by this chart, spend 36% of their travel time midday. And if you want to think about that, that's in terms of 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., compared to 24% of all riders. This was also reinforced independently through a study we've been working on with Portland State University to really better understand transit-dependent populations as well as barriers to transit access and accessing our transit. A unique element of this proposal is its use of a transit equity lens to determine investments. Using a framework from the University of Illinois Chicago, coupled with what we've heard from transit-dependent riders, community-based organizations, and other stakeholders all throughout our service district and region, we developed 3 categories. The first, environmental justice, which considers minority, poverty, and limited English proficient communities. The second, transportation disadvantage, which considers 60-minute commutes, the much longer commutes that it takes folks to make. Free and reduced lunch, honored citizens, and transit-dependent concentrations. And finally, livable communities, which include affordable housing and jobs access. And I think the emphasis here is not just livable wage jobs, which we know a lot of our transit-dependent riders have multiple issues in terms of accessing those jobs, but really emphasizing entry-level positions such as retail jobs. This work represents an innovative approach to making investments in service and is a model for us to use when wanting to make the biggest impact with a limited amount of dollars that we all know we have. A brief snapshot of our proposed public engagement elements is to inform the broader public of this package through social media, web, targeted print media, and a series of community meetings that will be coupled nicely with our Title VI outreach, which will occur one in each county throughout the months of October and early November. We'll also rely upon the guidance and experience as well as expertise of our already existing committees, Trimet committees, CAT, TAC, well, let me describe what that is for the audience, Committee on Accessible Transportation, Transit Equity Advisory Committee, and the Budget Advisory Committee will be engaged in those discussions. And finally, as Eric pointed out earlier, assuming this timeline, March 2014 would be the earliest service change window, which would require schedules to be finalized this November. With that, we'll take any questions. Thank you.
Well, I don't know about you, but I find that presentation somewhat disgraceful. because he's just rattling back all the right words, all the right sayings, justifying everything. Everything is beautiful at Trimet. That's what you're hearing. We're doing everything right. Everybody's getting served properly, and I'm black, so I can tell you that everything is just wonderful at Trimet. We've done all the research, all the studies, and everything is wonderful. And I just think the guy is an Uncle Tom. I'm sorry.
I don't believe racism in this country today holds anybody back.